The naira sustained its slide against the US dollar as it weakened to an all-time low on the parallel market where it sold at 1,100 naira to a dollar, weaker than the 1,060 naira to a dollar traded the previous day. On the official investors and exporters window, the nation's currency fell to 883 naira 56 kobo to the dollar yesterday, as against the 775 naira 44 kobo to a dollar it sold the previous day. The naira's depreciation is attributed to persistent dollar shortages in the financial system and new demands such as import bills. Amaka Anku, Africa head at Eurasia Group, joins me now to discuss this further. Amaka, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Abby.
Yes, so let's begin with Nigeria's FX challenges in spite of floating the naira. Why are we here? What's your analysis?
So I think I always like to remind everybody, because we often think of the dollar shortages as a government problem, right? Like, we look to the government, what is the government doing about dollar shortages? And I think it's important to remember this is a whole of society, whole of economy problem, right? Because if we had a productive economy, meaning we were making a lot of things to sell to the world to earn dollars, we would have a lot more dollars, right? Right now, we have to rely on the little bit of dollars that we're earning from the sale of oil, which is, owned by the government. So it's just, my framing thought is, remember, it's a long-term issue, but we need to invest in productivity and making stuff, whether it's from agricultural products to manufacturing, so that we can sell to the world and earn more dollars, right? In the short term, though, I think this is a really serious challenge for the government, and one that I hope they have put everything on the table, right? Like, they need to be looking at all the options to get more dollar liquidity in the short term, because it's hard to do anything else, right? When your currency is depreciating this fast. All of the reforms that, I work with investors, but I think even Nigerians acknowledge that we needed to remove the petroleum subsidies. I know that it's hurting, but it hopefully allows the government to make investments in other areas. But it's hard to sustain that if the dollar keeps depreciating. Right,
it's quite a mixed bag. And of course, you do mention depreciating this fast. Those are key words there. I guess that's what makes it a bit alarming. Yeah. But like you also said, it's a collective effort. So there's quite a bit of work to be done, right? Well, let's move on to the Federal Executive Council approving a $1.58 billion loan request. What do you make of that?
I mean, well, we just said they need to put all options on the table. So you need to get the dollars from anywhere you can get the dollars, right? 1.5 billion it's too small, right? It's small, right? They need more in relation to the need, but it's a start, right? They should try and get more concessional loans. I know that people are worried about borrowing, but at this point, they do need the dollars.
So if we juxtapose that against the country's debt profile, are you still leaning towards that opinion?
I do not think that we have a debt problem, right? This is something that I talk about a lot. Our debt to GDP is just about 40%. If you include all the ways and means borrowing, i.e. the borrowing that the federal government was doing from the central bank that it hadn't really accounted for. I do think we have a revenue problem, because if you look at the debt service to revenue ratio, it is 96, it's almost 100%, right? We're spending everything we earn, everything we collect from in revenue to service the debt. But it's not because we're necessarily borrowing that much, it's because we're not getting enough revenue. So I'm not averse to borrowing, as long as there is a serious and concrete effort to actually raise our revenues. We have one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios in the world. We're only comparable to failed states like Afghanistan and Somalia, right? That's just it's not acceptable for the biggest economy in Africa. So I do think if we did that, if we raised our revenue, if we could double it to 18 to 20% of GDP, we wouldn't have a debt problem. in
Well,
my
I
view.
mean, I think that's certainly a very interesting perspective because that's a bit of a mixed bag on that one generally. But talking about the biggest economy, well, we're not going to be having that title very soon because, of course, South Africa is soon to surpass Nigeria as Africa's biggest economy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the dynamics playing in that.
Yeah, so I'm not that concerned because even when you read the headlines up top, you said they would only hold it for a year. Right? Like, we all know where the trends are. And I mean, I'm not saying this because I'm a Nigerian, right? I run the Africa practice for Eurasia Group. South Africa hasn't grown in a decade either. South Africa has pretty substantial structural problems. I think actually, if I were juxtaposing the two, I think Nigeria's growth prospects are better, right? If we can figure out, we have certain difficult challenges, but we also have lower hanging fruit. Because South Africa has to deal with figuring out how to expand opportunity for the entire majority of its population, right? If you look, South Africa has, 10% of South Africa's assets are owned, 90% of South Africa's assets are owned by 10% of the population. It's a huge structural issue for them that will take years for them to figure out. We collect 10% of our GDP in revenue. Right? To me, that's like such low-hanging fruit. All you have to do is like actually go out there and make an effort to collect more revenue. And if you could do that and you can invest in the things that will make your economy more productive, you'll grow, right? So I'm not too concerned about the brief headline change because I think that if Nigeria does the things it needs to do, it's fundamentally a bigger growth economy. And the numbers show that, right?
Yeah,
even they're only saying for a year.
Certainly do. But of course, there's always this. It's almost as the little wars, South Africa, Nigeria.
Yeah.
Was going to take the baton next. But of course, I mean, also if you would like to put this in context, so South Africa is the most industrialized.
Yes.
Why would you made a very interesting comment about the fact that this is just going to be 1 year for them.
Yeah.
Why are we not seeing a much longer time frame to hold this title? We're still on it. In spite of that, we know we do have low-hanging fruits here, but what are some of these encumbrances on the part of South Africa?
Because they have a structurally unequal economy.
Yes.
It's very hard for them to find growth now because the area that has been growing a lot initially was mining, and they'd mine a lot of coal. Nobody wants coal anymore. Of course, they mine a lot of other things too, but they have a lot of, challenges with power, which is a lot harder for them to deal with because they're not used to it like we are. But I think, structurally, they need to figure out what's the next growth engine for the economy. And that's going to take them quite a while, in my view, to figure out.
Yeah, quite interesting dynamics playing there for those two economic giants, so to say.
Yeah.
But let's get your overall outlook in wrapping up on Nigeria's economy.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I want to say on the South African note, I always say, you mentioned something about how there's always this sort of tension, tussle. And, just since you raised it, who's the biggest economy, who's not? I actually think Nigeria and South Africa should be working together.
I absolutely agree with you on that.
And I think that the only chance they need each other, right? Because South Africa's economy has been on a decline for a while. And yes, I'm not sure exactly, I haven't read the report. I'm not sure what's driving this, brief stint at the top. And then it's going down for the next 10 years based on the graphic they had in the report. But the economy is going down. Nigeria's fundamentally a better growth economy, but South Africa has the political sort of, global clout because they've been there for a while. Nigeria has more cultural clout in Africa. So imagine if the two of them worked together and they had joint positions to the world and they said, you know what, if you want to come invest in Africa, do X, Y, Z. Both sides benefit, right? Nigeria grows more, South Africa grows more. So I hope it's something that our new government is thinking about, how to reach out to South Africa.
A number of efforts already, gearing in that direction. We have the Africa Energy Week Summit currently in South Africa, and some very interesting conversations. Of course, we want to see conversations move into action, right? Because sometimes that's just where it ends. Amaka, no, thank you so much for being on the show this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll hope to have you again very soon.
Thanks.
All right, then.